That's exactly what I used to do when I was a small boy. As soon as school was finished, we'd be right down here to play, because this whole place was covered in old railway engines that had been laid out to scrap. And we all had our own engine. And I think I can even remember the number of my engine was number 46. And we used to write our names on them in chalk as well. But of course it was very, very dangerous, and they had a number of railway personnel who would come and collect us by the ear and take us off home to our mothers. It was a beautiful time to be a child here with this sort of energy that this station produced. And as a matter of fact, when they built the Midland Hotel here, we thought this is like America. We'd never seen a building that big. And people used to arrive here. I remember Laurel and Hardy arriving here, and they went and had their hair cut in the barber shop opposite. And there were kids for miles around. And of course, there were very famous pubs here. I remember them very, very well. They had the Windsor Castle and the Edinburgh Castle and the Waterloo, and they had all these wonderful windows depicting the Iron Duke's victories at Waterloo and all this stuff. It was a great, great place, and as I say, it was just like a little village in another town. Of course, in my day as a youth growing up here, they had steam trains, and the carriages were first, second and third class, and they were painted cream and green. And we used to always buy third class and get in the second class. Of course, we were promptly thrown out by the guards who were employed to get guys like me all the time. Sometimes our parents actually bought proper tickets and we were taken by train to the seaside, and that often meant a day to Portrush or Newcastle and the Mourne Mountains. If it was Newcastle, we always travelled by the Belfast and County Down Railway, which was the quickest way. However, although Newcastle was only a small seaside town, it had another railway to it, the Great Northern. This line used to snake away into the mountains, and we never ever travelled on it. Both lines, sadly, are long gone, so we can't travel by train anymore. But I can take you on a little nostalgic trip down that mountainy line to see the stations it served and meet some of the people who will never forget the days of the train.
Quite wild countryside, quite inhospitable, I would say, and uninhabited. Mountainy country, as we would call it. It was a really wonderful experience. Normally I would be travelling to Belfast, but to travel to Newcastle and see all these strange and wonderful places. You came to Banbridge, the metropolis of Banbridge, and with this branch line to Scarva, and then you went into the wilds of the countryside to Ballerony and Ballyward, and all these several little stations. I think there was Poland's Bridge and Savage's Bridge, where when you wanted to get off, you looked out the window and waved at the guard, and he came dashing along with a little pair of wooden steps and put these down, because there was no platform. There was just, I think, a sort of a hut and an oil lamp, and he put these little pair of steps down and helped people out of the compartments. Obviously, there wouldn't be too many passengers at those places, but the train seemed to stop everywhere.
I'm walking along the platform of Scarva station, and it was here that the train used to take off going to Banbridge, which carried on then to Newcastle. It used to start just over here. Scarva is on the main Belfast to Dublin line, and it was a very busy station. It's still very busy on the 13th of July every year, because that's the day they reenact the Battle of the Boyne, which took place in 1690. And the battle, of course, was between King James and William, Prince of Orange. Of course, he always wins every year, but now and again they're taking bets that the Catholics might win. And just down here we have a big bush which is cut out in the shape of King William. And we're going to talk to two gentlemen who are train drivers on this line most of their lives.
How are you doing? I'm Mickey Mead.
Nice to meet you, Mickey. James Galway.
Oh, lovely.
Morning, Morgan.
Nice to meet you, Barney.
Nice to meet you, Jim.
Well, you must have a few memories about this place here.
We're just saying here the changes there is from we came here, from we were working into here. That was a platform there.
Yes.
There was a waiting room here, It's just unbelievable, the changes.
Well, listen, why don't we go and have a cup of tea and you can tell us all about it.
Go have a cup of tea.
Shakespeare by any chance?
I think he was baptized.
Right.
But there was something about steam, you know, an entirely different life from any other job. You loved it. When we were going to work on a Saturday afternoon, boys that you knew standing about the corner were laughing at you, going to work on a Saturday at 3 o'clock and them going to a football match or something like that there. But I don't know, we still got time to do a wee bit of courting now and then.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm sure there was...
Well, I'll tell you another story. I was in that diesel, on the last diesel going down to Scarva 11:15 on Saturday night. It was closing, and the late Nelson Hall was the driver. Well, coming back up, you didn't look tickets. Everyone was looking to keep their tickets for souvenirs. But I finished up, James, with not a blinking button on my tunic or my waistcoat, for they were just coming doing this and doing that and doing that. And I hadn't a button on my coat, tunic, waistcoat, or even the 3 wee buttons here. They were just coming, taking them off. Souvenirs. So I finished, I was bloody near naked.
When you began, they didn't have diesels, they had steam, right?
Oh, well, they had always the A car on the Scarva branch. In fact, they had, do you remember the wee converted bus? It was a bus converted to run on the track, you see.
Yeah.
And it was a bus that they used, but then the air car come, and Mickey, he drove it for a long time.
It was just a different way of life, because when you were driving a diesel, you could have went with your good clothes on. Where if you were on the driving on the steam or even a farm entirely different. Now the farm when you went round there to cool your engine, he had to stand on the engine. The driver got off it. You see, went onto the gantry. This coal come down in big chutes, and the dust and everything. So the farm he had to stand there. The driver got off with his white shirt and all. He wasn't getting dirty, no chance. But the farm got it all the time.
Yeah.
We actually had a driver now in Banbridge, and he starched his overalls.
Yeah, starchy.
Starchy.
Right.
Yeah, starched the overalls.
I read about him.
Oh, white shirt.
Well, I'm walking along the side of the River Bann, and at one point they had 10 linen mills down here, which employed probably everybody in this area. And some of these mills had their own siding the trains would run into, and it's such a siding that I'm walking on right now. To give you some idea, everybody I knew when I was a kid either worked in the shipyard or in the mill. My mother actually was a winder in a spinning mill. She'd wind the yarn onto the bobbins that they put in the looms to weave the linen. And of course, I'm very familiar with this whole way of life.
Very often the train would be full when you got to Banbridge, but unlike the railways today, this was no problem. 2 or 3 extra coaches were quickly obtained, and these were shunted on the front of the train, and away we would go again.
Near to Banbridge town in the county down in a morning in July, down a mooring green came a sweet colleen, and she smiled as she passed me by. Oh, she looked so neat from her 2 white feet to the sheen of her nut brown hair. Such a coaxing elf, I'd to shake myself to make sure I was really there. From Mantry Bay up to Derry Quay, and from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the brown colleen that I met in the county down.
This whole station has been closed now for 30 years, 40 years. But away back during the war, in between the wars, it was a very busy wee spot, you know.
And what did you have to do? What was your first job when you got here in the morning?
Oh, you were selling tickets in there, or you learned to sell the tickets. And there was a lot of fowl, dead fowl, poultry, being shipped from here, and you had to invoice it and wait, and it was a routine sort of job. You nearly knew everyone that was travelling, and you nearly knew what business you were going to get.
Sure. The people there had their own carriages to go in till in the mornings, and you daren't have walked into it. You see that some of them would have had a card school, or a lot of girls together, having a bit of chat.
They did have women's carriages, didn't they? Women's compartments.
Yes, ladies only.
Yeah.
Yes, not too many.
I don't know how you qualify for that.
Well, no, that's a good, yes.
And of course, at the station, you had the gents and ladies waiting room.
Gents and ladies waiting room as well. But there was always a great fire on there in the waiting rooms.
We had persons who were really devout, and devout Christian people, and then on the other extreme we had those boys that went away off and on and got drunk and had to be left home and all this. So you had a wide spectrum of human nature here.
Right.
I can remember a car landing there on one occasion with 4 fellas in it, you see, and they all tumbled out, and it was quite obvious they were to drink. The drink or two on them. And someone says, open the door, the train was about to go, and the first 3 fellas were ceremoniously landed in to the carriage. And when the train was about to move off, this fella came in through the door, and he had his wee brown paper bag with him, and he says, I'm emigrating. I should be going. Those fellas are only leaving me down. So we had to pull them out and get him in.
There was great comings and goings at Ballyward Station. It was a very popular station, and the people would have said, oh, we'll get it to Ballyward. And everybody was so helpful, especially my own grandmother. Now, lots of people would have come with bicycles and they'd have left them in my grandmother's yard, and they would have probably missed the train, and you had to wait then or go. Well, Grandma would have brought everybody in who missed the trains, and they got tea or whatever they wanted, and they stayed there. And there was great chat, and everybody was happy.
How are you doing? Now, where we're standing here, this was the main line, right?
That's right.
You had to have little sidings and things like that around here.
Right, yes.
There are 2
yes,
sidings.
there's 2 there.
Yeah.
2.
And that was for the goods that were brought here.
Yes.
And the potatoes they brought, how did they bring them in? How was that all done?
Oh, they brought them in church, horse and church, put them into the store, and bagged them.
They put them in bags here.
Yes.
100 bags.
And then had to put them into the wagons.
Right. And with a bit of luck, they got to Belfast
They got
intact.
to Belfast, that's right.
Catesbridge, Ballaroni, Ballyward and Leitrim. Every morning going up and that in the summertime now for the spuds, you had to leave off the ampy wagons at the different places at those 4, and then coming back on the Newcastle goods at night, collect them, shunt them. Barney would have done the shunting.
You'd wonder that people won't hurt or kill. Now, we left Newcastle with the goods, and that was the last electric light you had till you landed in Banbridge. And you were getting maybe 10, 20 wagons of potatoes at Ballyrona, or you were getting them at Leitrim or Ballyward. And all the light you had was your old hand lamp with a colza oil in it, And there you were shunting away in the dark, and you'd hear the smack of them wagons going up in the dark. And you'd wonder how a winter's night, in the storm, your lamp would have blew out. There the driver didn't know where you were. There you were footing. You'd wonder they hadn't some electricity or some electric. But you were using the old hand lamp with hand signals, green and red light to stop and start. You were wagging them back with a lamp and you were wagging them ahead, all in pitch darkness.
Well, Jimmy, here we are at Leitrim Station. It's really very sad for me because I've, of course, very happy memories of this station. And indeed, I've been coming here since I was a child in the pram. My maternal grandparents just lived up the road and my mother came here very frequently. And there was, in fact, a paling here to separate the platform from the outside world. And the railway line came through here from Belfast via Banbridge on to Newcastle. Right. And here we are at the outside the station master's office. His room was in there. Indeed, I can almost hear the tinkle tinkle of the telegraph. And this was in fact the passenger waiting room, and there were large doors here which slid up and down. And in the winter time there would have been a fire there to keep us warm while we waited.
So Ken, tell me, what was it like when you first arrived here, the very first time you arrived here? I believe it was during the war.
When we were evacuated here, it was the kind of sport for the local lads here to come down to meet the last train at night. And the lads used to gather in, come down on their bicycles or walk and wait for the train coming. And in those days, of course, there was such terror in the land from the air raids that the trains were arriving in the evening packed with people just trying to get away from the potential horror of the whole thing. But there was one memorable evening I remember. There was this old man got off, I'm sure he was in his late 70s. An old duncher, and he had a hessian sack over his shoulder, absolutely crammed with whatever possessions he could put into it. And in the other hand, he was carrying a frying pan with the grease still frozen to it and the bacon still stuck to it. The poor man had just grabbed the pan and fled.
But there was one time in those days of the war, there was a day left off for cattle, with maybe 2 specials and 1 of sheep. But there was a miscount of a wagon of sheep, and there was sheep short when they landed in the docks in Belfast, and there was a whole inquiry about these sheep, and Joe, being the checker, he was first man, and they says, Joe, what way did you count these sheep? Well, Joe says, I looked through the slot of the wagon, and he says, I counted their feet and I divided by 4.
And I remember one occasion, I don't remember whether it was 1940 or 42, but there was a very serious snowfall. And in fact, it was so bad that the line was closed for about 3 days. Now that was rare,
That's
really rare.
Even these?
That's right. Yes. And I mean, it was just the farming community around here were devastated with this because there was a whole question about where provisions were coming from.
I can remember the train being stuck at over there over the corner at the bridge there. And the people from where I came from Drumley way, the farmers walked over the hedges at the top of the telegraph wires, the telegraph poles, to get bread from the station.
I remember we come out in the morning and I was very small, and my uncle got me up and stood me on his shoulders, and I was able just to see over the top of the snow line, and this whole valley, all you'd have seen were tops of trees.
We're standing just here outside the station master's house of Castlewellan Station, which of course is long dead and gone. And guess who's sharing the same graveyard? The successor of the railway, the old bus. You know, I'm surprised that railways don't come back.
Well, you see, they're trying to bring them back. They realise the mistakes that they've made.
It's a real big one.
At the present time, if they had, we'll say the railway Banbridge was still open, make it until depot there, till send the goods out till Ballaroni, Ballaward, all round. Instead of that, to the roads you can't move on them.
Here is another old linen mill. This valley we've just travelled down was one of the most important linen producing areas in Ireland. The mills were a way of life for so many people. And cricket was very popular with the workers, and they played in this field here against all other teams. And not only that, they made their own clothes for the cricket teams in the mills. There was a mill on the corner of the street where I grew up, and I used to watch everybody going to work in their overalls. They were all part of our culture. But now, as you can see, the mills are dead, the railway's dead, and there are no people.
When you got to Castle well and well, you knew you were nearly there, and the train came dashing down the incline down into Newcastle with your views of the moorns and the sea, and it was great excitement by everyone. I don't think people nowadays realise that it was a tremendous adventure to go on a Sunday school excursion.
Well, here we are, right outside Newcastle station, which is the end of the line. And we have a young man here who's going to tell us a few things about the station here. I read that they had a lot of extra trains on, excursion trains, during the summer.
Oh yes, indeed. Sunday schools.
Yes.
From Dromore right down, Banbridge. They all seem to come this way. It was cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an easy way of keeping the kids together.
Yeah.
Bundle them into the train and
lock the door.
Lock the doors and
keep them in there.
And off you go. And then they discharged them here, let them loose here. Happy days. And that old fella, there was an old lady rated him here one day. They had a thing in the middle of the platform, a wooden clock.
Yeah.
And every now and again, the next train from, his duty would go out and he would turn it round to whatever time.
Oh, I know what you mean, yeah, right. Yeah.
And this old lady, she got at him to give him a dove on this day because the train she was waiting on wasn't on time. And her time was precious, and it should have been on time. And he stood looking at her, and she wanted an explanation. And this is what he said to her. The train before was behind, missus. But I've seen the train behind before besides because the train before is behind, missus. And she took a couple of steps back from him and she looked at him and said, "Right, complicated, thank you very much."
It was very, very busy in Newcastle, and you would have heard the people say, "Oh, there's another train in." Maybe a train from Downpatrick on the BCDR line, you know. And they said, "Oh, there's another train coming in," and it was very, very busy. But there wasn't, of course, the amount of cars that there is nowadays. And then there was the promenade. It was lovely, and there was trees there, but now it's all taken away, and the people used to sit along the walls, and it was great. And you'd see such and such a one. Oh, they were at Newcastle, so they and the neighbours, you know. And it was a wonderful day. You got a lovely meal for 1 and 6pence. Lovely meal.
Slieve Donard Hotel was a big building there where we all knew it was there, and we all just knew that's where all the rich people went, but we weren't allowed to go there. We weren't even allowed into the grounds, although the odd time I was in the grounds when I shouldn't have been. But the Slieve Donard Hotel was a very, very luxurious hotel, and did bring, the Belfast County Down did bring a lot of business and trade to the Slieve Donard, being a railway hotel and being a very, very most beautiful railway hotel. One of the most beautiful, I would say, in the British Isles. The Slieve Donard would be, standing on the 10 acres that it does. Sometimes when I walk down the bed of the old tracks, it brings back memories of the enjoyment people got coming along the railway line to Newcastle to spend a holiday, to spend an afternoon, to spend a day at the seaside, and all the people who I knew down through the years connected with railways, the sort of people they were and how devoted they were to what they had to do, and it brings back some lovely memories.
Well, here we are. This is really where the mountains of Mourne sweep down to the sea. This has been a very interesting journey for me altogether. I never expected anything like this. To hear the tales of these people who were enthusiastic about their way of life, who loved what they did, who got up at all hours of the morning to do it, and who enjoyed the most beautiful scenery in the world, just going through these little valleys and things. And you know, it's rather sad in a way to think that it's all gone now and that it'll never come back. Anyway, I don't wish to end on a sad note, and I hope you enjoyed the program as much as I did, and I hope the enthusiasm of the people in it will touch you as much as it has touched me.
And the book to accompany the TV series, Off the Beaten Track, is now available in bookshops nationwide.